welcome to the Universal Journalist Radio with your host, Reverend Brenda L. Bates and Donnie Winter. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. Universal Journalist Radio is about how spirituality intersects with nearly every other aspect of our lives, even when we don't see it or realize it. Creativity and expression are our connections to spiritual energy. Many seek to understand, and our identity is forged through this process. Universal Journey seeks to help illuminate the different intersections between creativity, spirituality, and identity in order to empower and enlighten. Tonight's show is, want to know a secret? We'll be discussing Easter. Our call-in number is 347-850-8292. Welcome, Donnie.
Hello, Brenda, dear. How are you this evening?
I'm geeked.
Me too, and I got my coffee in hand, so I am fully prepared.
Yay! I had to actually, speaking of coffee, I was running around in the house earlier and looking for coffee to make, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to get that instant coffee. I just don't want that stuff, and I couldn't find any, so I had to zoom out. Guess where? I was going to go to Tim Hortons, but I ended up in McDonald's, of all places. But
Brenda. Oh, my goodness.
Hello. It's like, it's Easter, no one else is open. Oh,
this is true.
But I definitely did get a cup of coffee, and now I'm drinking water.
Oh, how healthy of you. My water is in my coffee.
Yeah. Woo, there you go. That's the best water, right? Not.
Right? I think so.
So our topic today is on Easter. Is it real? Is it the truth? Or is it something totally different? What do you think?
What do I think?
What do you think?
I think, based on what spirituality you are, Easter is real. Like, I don't know. I look at religion and spirituality from an anthropological perspective. Like, every culture has different spirituality with different holidays associated with it, and I think it's real for those who practice it. I don't necessarily celebrate Easter, but I know a lot of people who do.
I can say the last 2 years for me it's been kind of tough because with my research and everything that I've been doing with the last several years for quite some time, is I'm finding more and more that for me it's not the Christian-based Easter as I used to believe a long time ago. And I think it's because of some of the things that, is associated with it. You're talking the death and resurrection, okay? Well, Christianity coins death and resurrection with Jesus, Savior, and he's come back. Well, during the Egyptian time frame, okay, way back when, before Christianity and before other things that the Greek mythology and stuff like that, it was associated with Osiris and Isis, and also Horus.
Really?
And it was Osiris who technically came back to resurrection. Isis went and resurrected Osiris so that she could have a child. And that child was considered to be a virgin birth through Isis. So with the virgin birth, also for Christianity, you have the Blessed Virgin Mary and you have Jesus, and that kind of all come about. Well, for me, I've seen how things like that have been taken from one culture and placed into another and called real. This is the truth. And I like what you said earlier. It is the truth for some people. And I don't mean to take that away at all. But there is a deeper meaning.
I agree that there is a deeper meaning, and it's always good to explore different interpretations of holidays and the origins of those holidays. I know, like, I took mythology class a long, long time ago, and we were talking about Christianized holidays, and we mentioned that certain elements of Easter, the death and then the resurrection, some of those elements were taken also from pagan cultures, from pagan religions, because the symbolism of death represents I believe it's associated with the winter solstice, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
The death of the sun and then the rising of the sun again, which was the point where days started growing longer. And there's a lot of rumor that I'm not sure if it was Catholicism, but Catholicism adapted that from pagan culture to their own spiritual beliefs, but that is an interpretation. I don't know if that is completely true or not, but that is another perspective to examine.
Right. Well, and Catholicism you were correct, but it did take on some of those rituals and some of those holidays because with the Catholics or Christian, we call it Christianity at that particular time, because it wasn't Catholicism, it was Christianity. And what they did is they couldn't get the pagans to join their new religion without having something integrated like this. So they just took it on and called it something a little bit different, and they added to it. So that's how we have some of these holidays like Easter, like Christmas. Even Christmas is really the winter solstice. Because Jesus, if you go back and you really do some research, Jesus wasn't born until January, February time frame. So that was past Christmas. So everything evolves, or a lot of things revolve around these holidays, these pagan holidays.
There's also a lot of confusion. Oh, what were you going to say, Brenda? I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say there's a lot of confusion surrounding when Christ was born as well, which this kind of ties into holidays, like the uncertainty of the origin of holidays, because some people say that Jesus was born, I think, was it year 0 or whatever, and then it started turning into AD, but some records say that he was born like 4 years after that or so. I think it was 4 years.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yep,
I'm not sure if that's true or not, but again, that's another example of the uncertainty of the origin of different holidays and stories, because there's so many different cultures intermingling and switching around ideas and taking ideas that it gets really jumbled trying to figure out where things come from.
Right. I mean, and a while back I did a search to find out what the timeline between Christianity and between Hinduism and between the Judaic religion and some of the other indigenous cultures timeline. And it became very jumbled with several different sites that I went to, and it is like, really, because they're doing this propaganda twist to make it seem like Christ came before everything else, and that's not necessarily true. Even with Christ or Jesus, he went off and left us alone for several years, and they're even debating on where he went, and there's documentation that he went to India and he went to Egypt. But they're saying, oh, no, he didn't go there. But you have all of that. And it is quite interesting how through the ages things come together. I mean, just like some people say, well, where did the egg come from for the Easter,
Right. I always felt that the egg also symbolized birth, but obviously if you look at, Easter nowadays and how it's commercialized, the egg is supposed to represent something sweet and delicious as opposed to something sacred and symbolic.
Easter, I mean, the egg actually did come from the pagan tradition again, with Estar. and it's actually called Easter. Her name is, and that's a goddess that people used to go and, you know, try to get favors for her, and they used to give her the egg. The egg is considered fertility. So they would color the egg and everything else for fertility, and it also has to do with the resurrection.
Right.
You know, and the hair is also, I mean, that's what you got the rabbit. You know, the rabbit is a part of that also, that symbology, sorry. The hair is a symbol of fertility as well in ancient Egypt. So you're bringing all that aspect into this. So I mean, it's just quite interesting how all of these things kind of come together.
Exactly.
Oh, let me read
people
something.
Go on, keep reading.
So, I was going to say, and there is this one website that I'm reading, and it says the egg is explained in traditional folk religion. The egg is a powerful symbol of fertility, purity, and rebirth. It is used in magical rituals to promote fertility and restore virility. To look into the future, as well as to look into the future, to bring good weather, to encourage the growth of crops, and protect both cattle and children against misfortune, especially the dreaded evil eye. All over the world, it represents life and creation, fertility, and resurrection. So I thought it was pretty cool.
That is a very interesting.
That was pre-Christian origin.
I was going to kind of segue from that. Well, this relates to it, though. People are so unwilling to look at different origin stories or perspectives. And it kind of upsets me sometimes, because I feel like in order to understand the sacredness of something, you have to understand the bigger picture and look at it from multiple points of view.
And I've been doing a little bit of research on that too, and also looking from the perspective of, okay, Christianity says this, pagans say this, you know, Greeks say this, Egyptians say this, but really they're all interpretation of that particular culture. So what really is real?
That is a very good question.
You know, because you start to get into any culture and you get that rhetoric, that propaganda that says, okay, we need to get this to make it real. And after doing it for so long, that energy starts to build more and more. So the reality of it, for people who really get into these particular cultures or religions or beliefs and stuff, this starts to grow. It starts to mean something. It starts to open us up to something totally different.
Definitely.
It's just amazing. And really, is there really a truth to it? I mean, if you look at it, the aspect I just mentioned about what really is the truth, it's about perspective.
There are many, many different variables that weigh into what could be true. Like, we have the personal perspective, we have the cultural perspective, there's the religious perspective, there's a scientific perspective, and what causes so much conflict with the validity of these things is they all seem to all of those different variables butt heads instead of, you know, comparing and contrasting and finding similarities.
Oh, you know, and that goes back to when Christianity started to take over, and they got rid of all these the witches, you could say, who believed in using natural herbs and natural things and foretelling and all the rest of the stuff. And why can't we just live together and to understand that?
Right.
That's my big question.
Why can't there be a respect for that? Like, I mean, most religions, like most popularized religions nowadays, most of them have come from some sort of pagan-esque religion. That's how they evolved and changed. And but I get really upset when I hear people saying that pagan religions are primitive and uncivilized, and it's just like the main religions have never been uncivilized before and have done bad things. Like, I just don't get it.
Well, and look at the Inquisitions. I mean, that was bad things. I mean, they did some crazy stuff. Literally crazy stuff. I mean, I've been reading the book called The Vatican Heresy, and some of the pictures in there, it dawned on me, and some of the information, it dawned on me that in Egypt, some of the faces and everything else that was taking off of the hieroglyphics and some of this stuff, I truly don't believe it was other Egyptians. I believe it was Christians, because they just ransacked that whole area when they took over. In Egypt, used to be a very open-minded culture, and allowed different religious faiths to come in there and to learn at the University of Alexandria, and to go to the library. And the Greeks were there, and the Jewish culture was there, so they got along until a new religion came in, the Christianity. The Christianity says, "Oh no, that's not right," and the Egyptians tried to say, "Okay, let's take a look at this and stuff," and then all of a sudden it was switched around, and they condemned, and then they started warring and killing and desecrating some of their ancient things there, their artifacts and stuff in Egypt, and then it just all fell away, which is not a cool thing.
It all centers on the fear of difference. And I think when Christianity started taking off, everyone started believing that anything different was evil and unacceptable, and it had to either be converted or destroyed. And this goes back to the whole argument that we've posed in earlier shows that, like, religion itself isn't a bad thing. It's how people use the religion that's a bad thing. Like, it can be used for positive purposes, like enlightenment, or it can be used to destroy other people's identities. And that goes hand in hand with cultural destruction, too, because I'm trying to remember, I think, wasn't Christianity introduced to the areas of, like, Egypt and stuff through the Romans? I think it was the Romans that introduced it.
Not necessarily the Romans. Actually, it was some of the apostles that went over there, that they were told to go, like Peter and Paul and all the rest of those guys.
I know in that same time period that the Roman Empire was pretty powerful. I just wasn't sure where that involved itself.
Well, in the Roman Empire, actually didn't believe. They believed in different gods and goddesses and everything else. And Christianity is where they only believed in one God.
Yeah, there was a point where the Roman Empire converted to Christianity, though, too. I just don't know when that was.
Later on.
I think it was later on, too.
After Mark Antony. No, I'm just kidding.
I am so rusty on my history, it is ridiculous.
Yeah. It's just interesting how these things happen. And I've been noticing, too, is you have all these other religions that seem to be okay with other religions and stuff like that, except for two. Except for two, and they both believe in one God. Christianity and Muslims.
Yep.
And the funny part about it is they're warring against each other. The two cultures that believe in one God, they're warring against each other. What's up with that?
And people don't realize that Christianity and Islam have some similarities, too.
Huge.
And I don't know. It's all about perspective. And if you look at Islam, for example, there are many different, I guess you could call them denominations of Islam that conflict with each other, like the Sunnis and the Shiites, who all have their own agendas and everything like that are powered by their religion. And I was watching CNN the other day, and they had this very interesting topic they were discussing about how right now Islam is going through what Christianity went through 500 years ago.
Yes.
And I'm just thinking, I'm like, that's what makes, like, if you examine the history of Christianity and the constant power struggle between different interpretations of Christianity, it definitely correlates to what's happening today in that same region, but with Islam.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But people deny that. People completely deny it.
But it's because they don't see it. They don't want to see it. And everything, really, if you look back at everything, you can see how we were way back when to how they are now, and almost vice versa. Because there was a time when Islam was very, very powerful. And they knew a lot. They were more mystical than anything. I mean, it's just quite interesting how we've come, and they consider Muslims backwards and prehistoric. That's just a word I'm using, but it really isn't. It really isn't. They just haven't gone and developed as much as I'd say Christianity may have.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
but I definitely think the religious situation in that region is also a reflection of the cultural chaos in that region.
Well, yeah. We have a comment in the chat room. It says, all three are similar, and many of the global eye have spoken to consider them all created out of the same source. And that's true. We have all been created out of the same source. And, I mean, there's so many things that we fail to look at. And
they don't call it Judeo-Christian for nothing. That's awesome.
I love it. I love it. It's true. But the more and more I read and the more and more I research, I'm finding that, and this is quite interesting, I'm finding that the Jesuits are behind all of this propaganda and all this rhetoric that started way back when. It's amazing to me. And now look what we have. We have a Jesuit Pope.
First of all, explain to our listeners who may not be aware, but what are Jesuits exactly? Who are the Jesuits?
The Jesuits is the Society of Jesus, and the priest is called the Society of Jesus, who came into being, way back with Saint Ignatius is the founder. And I'm trying to remember the year. I don't know if it was 1100 or 1300. It was in between that time that he was a Dominican monk, and then kind of branched off. I think he was a Dominican monk, and then he branched off into his own religion. And it took several years for him to do what he did, gain followers and petition to the Vatican. He actually did something else with a university, and then he went and petitioned to the Vatican, and the Vatican made them official, the Society of Jesus. And they're technically considered the Marines of the Vatican, because they police and everything else, and they're very, very knowledgeable with spiritual aspects, with metaphysics, with ritual, with chemistry, with astrology. Astrology is a big one for them, in many other aspects. And they have universities and colleges all over the world. And they've been kicked out of several countries as well.
Interesting.
So if you want to know anything magical and ritualistic and stuff like that, they are the ones. Let's see. Let's not ignore that the Jesuits were created by Saint Ignatius of Loyola. Yep, that's the one. That's the one.
I guess I'm just very unfamiliar with the whole Jesuit side of things.
They have a middle road. I mean, they could go either way. I mean, they could be the persecutors, which they were way back when, and at times I think they still are, or they could be on the opposite side with very enlightened, very upbeat, like Pope Francis is right now, or they could be in the middle. You could see him as bad guy, the good guy, or the one in the middle, and they can play all of that because they have learned the process of being rhetoric. Okay, they use rhetoric with propaganda. In propaganda, you do as I say and do stuff like that. Loyola was Jewish, contrary to popular belief. Yes, he became, or he was originated was Jewish. Yes, then he converted to Catholicism. Yep, his family was Jewish. So I mean, he had that background. So very good.
That's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, there is a book out there which they don't like people to know or actually learn about. And if I can find it,
Brenda.
I have it here. Huh?
I said, dish it, Brenda.
Well, and it's the Secret Instructions of the Society of Jesus, the Jesuit priest, and it's by Anonymous. And when I was guided to this, and I do believe I was guided to this, it's like, these guys are not good guys, and they manipulate, they do different things, and this was written by Kessinger Publishing Company, Montana, USA. It's the request for rare esoteric books, which is very interesting. It's not a long read. It's very short, and it has to do with a secret society. It's a secret society.
So, did we want to take a break real quick, and then when we come back, you can tell us a bit more about the book?
Sure. I lost track of time. So,
I just looked at the time and I was like, crap.
So, okay, let's listen to some Kid Rock, okay? And if I can get you back up here, where'd you go? I'm having technical difficulties. Just a little bit. Where did he go? Here we go. Okay. And we're going to be born free. We'll be back in 4.5 minutes approximately. And welcome back to Universal Journeys with Reverend Brenda and Donnie Winter. Okay, Donnie, it's all yours.
Yay, we're back. Okay, so before we get started on the second segment of our show, I wanted to do a promotion. For those of you who do not know, Universal Journeys has a Facebook page. If you go to facebook.com and in the search bar on Facebook, you can just type in Universal Journeys. You'll be able to find us. There is a lovely picture of Reverend Brenda on there, and you'll be able to spot it. Or you could go to the URL bar and type in facebook.com/universaljourneys111, and you can also find us that way. If you like our page, we share we share links to our shows. We share empowering memes and uplifting things, and we love discussion. So if you want to come and discuss the shows with us, Facebook is a great outlet for it. I'm getting my wording mixed up. Okay, Brenda, back to you.
Okay.
That laugh was hilarious.
That's good, thank you. While we were gone, we did have some discussion in the chat room, and I Am the Universe. I is teaching in Switzerland, Germany, therefore my experience allowed me a more in-depth curriculum. That's true. And what I says is a Jesuit wrote the Mein Kampf, and I'm thinking, Mein Kampf? I thought Hitler wrote Mein Kampf. And let's see, and then I Am the Universe said that Adolf, I like Adolf, most certainly did not have the mental intellect to compile such literature. I don't know about that. I mean, I was in Germany for a little while there, and that was quite interesting about that process. Anyhow, so we go back, and then he says, sometimes when we research, we discover the unfathomable. And I said, indeed. I mean, it's like, right. But not a scripture writer. Okay. And let's see what else we have here. Let's see. Easter is East Star. Yes, like Eastern Star. Absolutely. I agree with that, too. So to go back to the Society of Jesus, as we're talking about that and some of the things that they did with bringing Christianity full circle or into more of the realm, you could say. I lost my train of thought. That's good. I like it when I do that. Yay.
You derailed.
I derailed. The Society of Jesus. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'm going to say the Society of Jesus mostly, even though Pope Francis is trying to get it to where that they're taking care of more of the elderly and those who are homeless and, you know, the impoverished and stuff like that. Within this book that it talks about that the Society of Jesus, they go to people who have money and they try to say, okay, because you have money and we want your firstborn, basically, and they get it in there, and after a while they die, and so the church gets the church gets the majority of the money. So, wow. So I mean, so there's manipulation going on there, and what they would do is they'd befriend a widow who had a lot of money, and then they would convince her to give it to the church or to the Jesuit organization that was there. And then we won't even begin to speak about some of the atrocities that happened South Central America, you know, and those were Jesuits who went in there to learn the spiritual aspects or the indigenous populace culture, and then they would say, okay, well, we learn what we need to learn, and then they sent in like the Soto and them, the Spanish conquistadors, and just to annihilate everybody. It's like, really, guys? Did you really have to do that? So a lot of that stuff was crazy, and this is all in the name of God. Give me a break.
Isn't it interesting how they disguise it in that way?
Yeah.
You know, before we, the last half an hour of the show, you were talking about rhetoric. And I think that's something interesting that we should examine in reference to how other cultures or groups of people are influenced by religion. For those of you who do not know what rhetoric means, I looked it up on the Oxford Dictionary, and rhetoric is the art of effective or persuasive speaking or writing, especially in the exploitation of figures of speech and other compositional techniques. Let's see. Another definition is language designed to have a persuasive or impressive impact, but which is often regarded as lacking in sincerity or meaningful content. Now, before we move on and talk about religion in reference to it, a lot of people assume that rhetoric is a bad thing. It isn't necessarily a bad thing. Again, it's just like religion. Rhetoric can be used for a good purpose or a negative purpose. If you watch the news all the time, you'll always hear the news people say, oh, they were using some form of rhetoric in their speech, or, oh, they were using, I mean, let's take political parties, for example, a Republican or liberal conservative or liberal rhetoric, okay? I also wanted to provide a few definitions throughout history also. Rhetoric was originally coined, I believe it was by Aristotle, and he said that rhetoric is the faculty of discovering in a given instance the available means of persuasion. Let me find another one. Sister Miriam Joseph in 1937 said that rhetoric is the art of communicating thoughts from one mind to another, the adaptation of language to circumstance. That's the definition that I always go by because it's the most objective definition. But when we look at these different religions, they are always using some form of rhetoric, but either if it's in their own writing or in the way they talk to groups of people. Rhetoric can be used to induce fear. For example, let me think of an example real quick. So when Christians way back when were going to different cultures and trying to convert different cultures to their religion, they were sometimes using the indigenous population's religion and connecting it to Christianity. So in that, they were using more of like a deceptive rhetoric because they were disguising Christianity in the garments of their own religion, okay?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if you go to certain churches and you listen to certain sermons, there are certain situations where the preacher or the pastor will use fear to get people to change, the fear of hell or the fear of suffering. That is rhetoric as well. He's using a rhetoric, I'm trying to think of what it would be called, a fear-type rhetoric in order to get the reaction that he or she wants.
Mm-hmm. 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 Right, and with media and with the television, they use propaganda. And that's exactly what they're doing with all this stuff. And, I mean, ISIS, I'm not making it a short thing of it, but when it first started, those guys do that crap all the time over there, okay? They behead, they kill, they take a hand if you do something wrong, arm or run, whatever. They do that over there. But the propaganda that transpired through all this process to make everybody afraid of ISIS or bring them into the limelight, that's propaganda. Propaganda, I mean, they use it to twist, which is what rhetoric really kind of does to...
Yeah, but propaganda is a form of rhetoric, I would say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So... And I learned about propaganda to a huge degree when I was in the service, and I was with a propaganda unit, a PSYOP unit, actually, a psychological operations group. So I mean, I found out about that, and I can see it when everyone else is going, oh my God, with all the news. It's like, that's propaganda, guys. That's what it is. You need to look at it for what it is. They're trying to get this reaction out of you so you either go to war or you'll be so freaking afraid that you won't do anything.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that's all part of that.
That's how rhetoric can be used for a negative purpose. You can use it to harm other people. But also you can use rhetoric and propaganda to make a statement, like a good statement. Like, I know,
yes.
Let's see, I was just reading in the news that recently there was a church, I'm trying to remember what state it was in. I think it may have been in Indiana, actually, a church that had like a bake sale or something, and they made rainbow-colored cupcakes in response to the Religious Freedom Act that many people perceived to discriminate against gay people. That is a form of rhetoric. It served as a response to another thing that happened, and it conveyed a point that they were resisting it.
Right. Right. And when they use stuff like that, they can twist it around or even make it to where you can be empowered by it. With what we're doing, it could be construed as a form of rhetoric as well, because we're bringing this information out. And it's like this uplifting, and at times we can be very uplifting, but this is empowering stuff. This is a different part of that.
Exactly. We're using the rhetoric of empowerment through a form of enlightenment, I'd say. Yes. So, but for the most part, when you have governments and things like that who try to instill fear-based, they're using a different type of rhetoric, and that propaganda
and that's to scare us, to get us to do things that we may not normally do, but yet because they've, produced this is what happens. And if more and more people would become aware of this type of propaganda and rhetoric, we would be totally different. And that goes back to, religion, and we're fighting back and forth with one another. It's like if we would see it for what it really is, we would be totally different.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, rhetoric is very deceptive, especially when you have a more powerful group of people using it to control another group of people.
Right.
A less powerful group of people.
Yeah, and I am the universe puts in here in the chat room is everyone is basically sitting ducks, and most know it. And he says apparently Brent Bart didn't. I'm not sure who that individual is, but because I haven't read anything on him. But Hastings and stuff I have. It's just amazing how we as individuals put blinders on and say, oh, that can't happen to us, or oh, the United States government wouldn't do this to us, and like, really? You better wake up and smell the roses, dudes, and do that, because they're behind a lot of this stuff.
It was just funny the way you do that. Yes. Well, and see, like, some people obviously think that ignorance is bliss. I think that knowledge leads to understanding. And the point you mentioned that about the government doing things, like, I mean, there's an extreme of, like, there's one extreme and then there's another extreme. There's an extreme where people are completely ignorant to anything going on, and then there is the extreme that assumes that the government is doing everything, like every single thing that happens is their fault, which isn't true all the time. And if people took a step back for a moment and looked at the bigger picture and examined the rhetoric or whatever is associated with the situation, they wouldn't veer between one extreme or the other. That's where a lot of the conflict comes in, is because people at different extremes are always butting heads with one another.
Right, but that goes to a chaos energy. And those who can know how to manipulate that chaotic energy or chaos energy, the chaos theory, they can garner that energy and use it to their potential or what they want to use it for.
Explain to our listeners what chaos theory is.
Thanks. What is chaos theory?
It's a very difficult term to define, but I feel like you probably know it in your vast knowledge of.
Well, I don't technically know it, but I do know that the chaos theory has to do with incidences or things that happen to us that puts us in a chaotic frame of mind, and where we don't know really what to do, and there's so much going on, and putting one person against another person. This is very simplified, and they use whoever it is. I don't know if it's the government, whoever. They use that chaotic energy to manipulate people because they've thrown them off so much that they actually get the individuals to do their own bidding, to do the individuals who are controlling the energy bidding.
Oh, interesting. I think I've heard of that before.
Yeah.
So they essentially gain power through creating, like, this chaotic unpredictability.
Chaos, just like 9/11. Chaos. That was chaos. What did they do? They got the backing of the people of the government or the people of America to go over and fight a war.
Yeah.
That's chaotic.
It's just one thing after another.
Order out of chaos. Yep. That's exactly
now,
what it is.
Would you say that these different religions that we've been talking about use that type of that chaos theory in order to get what they want.
Say that again?
Would you say that these different religions that we've been talking about, like Islam and Christianity, throughout history, they've been using this chaos theory too?
I would say maybe to a degree, but for the religions, they use more fear factors than anything.
Mm-hmm.
Because look what the Inquisitions did. You know, the Inquisitions, they tortured people, they killed people. I read something the other day about this really, really bright young woman in Egypt, and this is when Christianity was just getting into Egypt and stuff like that. She was very bright, very knowledgeable about the cosmos and different things like that. And however, people wanted her to go different places and to speak, and she said no. Well, one time she got into her chariot. This is how far back it went, or how long ago it was. She got into her chariot to go to the library in Alexandria when she was stopped by several monks, and they literally beat her up, took shells, scraped her skin off her while she was alive, all the way down to the bone, which ended up killing her, and then they burned her just because she was so knowledgeable.
I don't even know what to say to that.
And when I read that,
scary.
I was like, really? This is stupid. These monks or whatever probably didn't know half as much as what she knew on a much higher level, and could have learned something from her. But they chose to kill her instead. You know, all for the name of God and religion. That's crazy stuff.
And that goes back to the whole idea that for some people, knowledge is terrifying. Some people are willing to stay in that mindset of ignorance is bliss. I think that's an excellent example of that.
Yeah. And the universe put down their age-old philosophies are still most effective today. And yes, that's true. They are very effective. But, you know, it's time to change. It's time to change the old philosophies, because the old philosophies are starting not to work anymore. And I don't mean because of the New Age stuff. I mean because the changes in the planetary alignments and everything else and the stars, they are making us change. It is making us change. It's making us shut off all the old stuff so new stuff can come in. I mean, that's why I don't want to get into some of the other stuff, but this is why so many changes in the way we think is being brought out there on a natural level. That's why we're like so confused sometimes, you know, besides the chemtrails that are dropped upon us. But anyhow, the planetary alignments are making us change as well, like the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse and, you know, Saturn going retrograde, and it's just a bunch of stuff. I mean, we'll have to look at all of that stuff, and we're not doing that because we were told not to. It's been ingrained into us for eons and eons and millenniums. Say, that's false, that's evil, that's blah. You know?
We've been on this, like, constant recovery process from that ignorance is bliss mindset. And like I read runes and I read oracle cards and stuff like that. I don't do it to predict the future. I just do it to ask questions, to gain different levels of understanding. But I know people who have just been like, that's crazy, that's not real, it's dumb, why do you do it? And I'm just like, I do it because it's true and real for me. That'd be like me telling people who read the Bible or the Quran or do other things like that they're crazy for believing that. If it's true to them, it's true.
Right. Well, and it's another way of connecting to the divine, which is a natural source.
And
exactly. That natural source, I mean, that is a God source. I don't care what you may say is bad or good or whatever. That's a divine source that you're connecting to. There's nothing evil about it unless you make it evil.
Definitely. People are so eager to jump to conclusions, and this is just another example of that.
Right. Eye of the Universe puts on in the chat room, beware of the leader who bangs the drums of war in order to whip the citizenry into a patriotic fervor. Where did it go? For patriotism is indeed a double-edged sword. It both emboldens the blood just as it narrows the mind. Absolutely. I agree with that. And when the drums of war have reached their fervor pitch, interesting that he used pitch, and the bloody boils with hate and the mind has closed, the leader will have no need in seizing the rights of the citizenry. Rather, the citizenry infused with fear and blinded by patriotism will offer up all of their rights unto the leader, and gladly so. Oh, I have to agree with that. I totally agree with that. I totally agree with that. And, patriotism is a good thing, but it's not a good thing in certain situations, as in beating the war drums, because I'm not gladly giving up my rights.
Mm-hmm. Like rhetoric. I mean, patriotism can be used as a form of rhetoric or a form of propaganda. Like when you look back at World War II, for example, or the Vietnam War, all the posters they would create and everything, that would appeal to young men, getting them to join the war efforts. Like, that's the point where they were using patriotism to create some form of change, I think, for a negative purpose.
Yeah. Just like Hitler.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler did the same thing.
And see, like, with Germany back then, like, since they were in such an economic and cultural upheaval, he served as their own, like, they perceived him as their only way out. And he capitalized on their uncertainty.
He most certainly did a lot of things, and it's just crazy. Now, let's top of the hour break, and we will be right back. And welcome back to Universal Journeys with Reverend Brenda and Johnny Winter. Follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. And I would like to put a plug in here for our sponsor, which is Mystical Awakenings Radio. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. And they have a show called Mystical Awakenings Radio, Wednesday night at 7 p.m. And also True Paranormal, Friday night from 7 to 9. Take it away, Donnie.
Okay, I'm going to do a little plug for myself as well. Outside of doing this show with Brenda, I also do YouTube videos. I do video blogging. So if you go to YouTube, if you go to YouTube.com and you type in Johnny Winter, you'll be able to find me on there. I just cannot speak today. And if you go on Facebook and you type in Johnny Winter, you'll also be able to find my like page, and I also post a bunch of different things on there too. I do videos about anti-bullying advocacy, autism awareness, LGBTQ issues. What else do I do? Nerdy things. So if you like all of those things, then totally go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Okay, back to you, Brenda.
Right. Yeah, and back to you. No. Well, just to follow up a little bit on Easter, with all the examples that we provided the last hour, you can see where Christianity has brought forth the propaganda to be able to do and to convince people of their way of thinking. With Easter, with Jesus and the resurrection and everything, we're going to start talking about something a little bit different. And we're going to go to spirituality. And, it's not much different than what we were, but spirituality to me is a passion. And I believe that we all have a right to it. We just don't get that right, or we don't take it because we don't realize that we have a right to it. And there's much more out there than being suppressed by certain faiths and beliefs and cultures and stuff like that, because it's much, much more than that. We can't put a key or a lock on God and say, okay, God is this. In reality, God is much more. And we are the creators of our reality. Go ahead.
That was an excellent quote. You cannot put a lock on God. That was awesome.
Yeah.
If I could etch things in stone, that would be in stone.
Yeah,
but you're completely right though, and I think a lot of people have varying degrees of spirituality beyond that of the mainstream religions that we see nowadays. It's just people are scared of expressing their spirituality or talking about it because it hasn't always been so socially or religiously acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I feel like mainstream religions, in a way, like even though they do, there's a lot of good people and they do a lot of good things, in a lot of ways, mainstream religions oppress other spiritualities, like all the time, more personalized spiritualities. But I remember reading somewhere that there was a poll that said that I think one of the primary spiritual practices in our country now are people who are just more spiritual, like with like the earth and like in tune with the nature around them, as opposed to mainstream religions like Christianity or Islam.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess
I
was going to say, I guess my question for you is, Brenda, like how, any point in your life, have you been uncertain or unsure about expressing your spirituality?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I remember growing up, I didn't have a religion, although I did attend when I was very young, a Baptist church. And then in my teen years, I attended a Methodist church, which was it was closer to what I was really kind of searching for, of the truth, than it was Baptist. Baptist was not one of my favorite Christian practices. But and then when I went into and then when I went into the service, I come across a man I eventually married, and he was Catholic. And the Catholicism in the Catholic Church, they actually professed that they were the true Church of God, which none of the other ones ever did. I'm like, wow, okay, I can do this. I learned about that. I very much learned about that, and that's where my spirituality and my closeness to Jesus came into play. I was always close to Jesus, but I always knew, too, as a kid, a very young kid, that I was going directly to the Father. The heck was everybody else. I was always the type of like, no, I'm going to the Father. Everyone else, to me, it didn't matter because, I was, maybe 8, 9 years old then. It's like, nope, directed to the Father. Mm-hmm. I know Jesus, I know about Jesus, I'm not married. So it was like, no. So when I became a Catholic, I became closer to God. At least I felt that way, and closer to Jesus. Even though I was saying the creed about, I believe in this and this and this, I really didn't, though. There was like this little, maybe not. There was much more to it, and I somehow I knew that. I knew that. And it wasn't until later on, before I got out of the service, that I started to read different things. I started to become more aware. And before this, I really didn't know a whole lot about psychics. I didn't really know a whole lot about intuition or the different types of intuition or any of that. The only thing I really knew about was ESP, and I really didn't even know about that. I remember seeing a guy on television one time who had ESP, and I thought to myself, I would like to meet someone like that. I think that would be so cool. Little did I know I am like that. And I have met people like that. So, but that, without going into the Catholic Church, for me, or becoming a Catholic, I don't think that I would be as far advanced as I am today without going and experiencing that aspect. Because through the Catholic Church is where I felt more energy. It came, I mean, I was buzzing, and I didn't know. With the priest that I come in contact with, especially one, I learned more. I mean, I had Patrick Baggio, Father Patrick Baggio, which we were very connected on an energetic level, more than he even realized and I even realized, but through that process we did experience. But he always used to say, there is a difference between spirituality and religion. But he never, ever said what that was. And so that got me thinking, okay, what is that? Yes, he was a Roman Catholic. So I went on my search, and we stay connected, and we still are connected, even though he's passed onto the other side or gone to God or whatever you want to call it. That connection is still very real. I still feel him. And he's taught me a lot. It's just, without that, I don't think I would have been able to do anything else. And I believe he's the one, after his passing, that actually brought me to the Jesuit, the Society of Jesus book, and got me to look at that prior to this Pope coming in. And that was several years. That was a couple of years after his passing that the book, I was introduced to the book. So it really was quite right. I mean, so I did the research, I did religion, I did spirituality, and I left religion there for a long time, and I'm still kind of not on the border. I'm still on the borderline of that, because I'm learning more and more as I go, and for me, that type of religion, in a way, condescending and very manipulative, and it takes your soul away from the true divinity of God, and they manipulate you on what they want you to do versus what God really wants you to do, and that's be free to be able to connect with him in any way that you can. So that is all a part of that. But if it wasn't for the Catholic Church and Catholicism, I don't think I would have been there. I mean, that was a long about drawn way, but it still, and to this day, I say that Catholicism is my basis. And it is, because they're so magical. I mean, there is the ritual of the Mass that continues to go and more, and we don't even realize it. And then some of the other Christian denominations say, no, that's bad, that's this, that's that. But I'm telling you, the Catholic Church has it going on in more ways than one. You just have to watch out. You have to be aware. And you have to know when to step back and when to step forward.
And
yes,
when to
I
look
agree.
at things from a bigger picture.
Right. And, if it wasn't for Constantine, and I don't mean Pope Constantine, I mean Constantine, if it wasn't for him, because he was pagan and his wife was Christian, and with all of that stuff going on, and with the Nicene Creed, and, coming in and bringing the different Bible Gospels and stuff into play, and not having other ones like I Am the Universe, the Gospel of Thomas, that wasn't put in anywhere. But that is very much information. That's very informational, along with the Gospel of Mary Magdalene. And I have to say, I have to do a comment on this too, with the Eye of the Universe. I'm sorry, but if you look at all religions, they all have pedophiles in it. It's just not the Catholic Church. Sorry. All of them do. All of them do. and what the Catholic Church is doing with these gentlemen, with the pedophilia and stuff like that, is wrong. They just throw them out and let them fend for themselves without any type of stuff. That's wrong. I don't believe in that. But anyhow, so without that aspect, without coming in contact with Father Baggio, I would not have gone on this journey. And I'm telling you, this journey has not been an easy journey, because there's been a lot of ups and downs. There's been a lot of deep, dark secret of the soul, or whatever you want to call it. It's not been easy. But I tell you what, when I've gotten through the other side, and it still continues, I am a much better person, and I can see different things.
I also
Well,
I was just going to say that I similarly discovered that I had some sort of like extrasensory perception as well, because when I was growing up, I realized that I could listen and talk to plants. And I really never told anyone this, because obviously I thought that everyone would think that I'm crazy. And I didn't start really acknowledging it until I went to college and started giving readings to people. And like for me, like doing readings was, I didn't feel like it had anything to do with my spirituality. It was just something I was good at doing. And when I started having dozens and dozens of people coming to me, random people I didn't know wanting a reading, that's when I was like, there's something more here. There's something more going on. And I think people just need to examine the things happening in their lives in order to understand their own spirituality, because a lot of the time, people don't understand that part of their identity.
Because they're told that it's evil, that it's the devil's work and stuff like that, and that's like so far from the truth. And then, this is my pet peeve, is the church has taught people to put the blame on the devil. Oh, the devil made me do it. My butt. Take responsibility for your own actions, for what you did. And believe me, when you do, and when you start to do that, you'll realize that, oh, I do have a part to play in this. It's not the devil. I can change that.
Right. It is interesting how eager people are to blame the devil or God.
Yes. It's just crazy.
People just need to learn how to take responsibility. And I think the reason why people act that way, the reason why they don't take responsibility, is because they don't understand themselves, because they choose not to. The more you know about yourself, the better off you'll be, because that's when you become closer to God. When you begin to know who you are, how you react to situations, and then change it. That is all part of the process. People are so eager to invalidate their intuition. I feel like everyone in this world has the capacity to have a very strong intuition and have extrasensory perceptions. Statistically, if you look at it, our brain, they say, is only 10% utilized most of the time. What about the 90% that remains? Right. If we were to tap into the rest of our ability, what could we do? People don't think about that.
There is a great movie out there, and it came out just not too long ago, and it's called Lucy. Okay?
Oh, I've heard of it.
The movie Lucy does just that. It does just that. It explains, and you go through the process with Lucy on some of the things that she became aware of because of this chemical that she was forced to carry in her stomach area, and then she got beat up and kicked, and it opened the bag, and the bag actually had crystals that were made from the fetus of a child. It's the chemical that's produced for the child's growth and stuff like that. And so when she was kicked in the stomach, some of it got into her, and then it started to develop more and more of her intuition and her sight and hearing and all that stuff. It's a great movie. It really is a great movie.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I guess people don't realize that, I mean, people's abilities vary. Like, I think creativity is an ability. Like, no matter what we do, we're always putting some form of energy out to this world. Like, when a person writes a poem or writes a story or writes an article or writes in a diary, I mean, what do you think you're doing? You're putting energy into something.
Right. You are. And, you know, thoughts have power. We don't realize that our thoughts do something that means something. Even if we're just thinking it, we're not putting it out there. People pick up on it. It's energy. Everything is energy. And if we could realize that everything is energy, everything that we think, we do, we feel is energy, then maybe we could become more aware of what we need to be and do and, you know, stuff like that.
Agreed.
And the other thing which is scary to most people is the fact that we are never alone. And that freaks the crap out of people because they think, oh, I'm my own little universe or my own little world and no one else can get in. Yeah, right. Wrong. You know, I went through that too. When I first realized and was kind of going through that learning process that somebody could read my mind and I didn't have any say whether that you could be or you couldn't listen or whatever. That freaked the heck out of me. It's like, oh my God, someone's listening to my mind. You know, they're listening to all my thoughts, and I'm supposed to be alone. And I just went back and forth. It means a lot of things on the spiritual path we do come across, and some stuff scares the heck out of people, and some after a while it's like, whatever. You want to listen to my thoughts? Okay, go ahead. You know, I don't care. You want to see me in the bathroom? I don't care. Because you're there, I'm here, whatever.
Preach it, Brenda. Preach it.
But we're never alone. I don't care if you are the only one in the room, in the physical room, you are still not alone. There is someone around you or someone's around you all the time.
I agree.
Be it our ancestors, be it angels, be it guides, be it, you know, Jesus, or be it whomever. We're never alone.
People are afraid of what they can't see. If they can't see it, then it's instantly not. It doesn't exist to them. And I think that's why everyone invalidates these abilities as well, because if they can't see it, then there's no proof.
Yeah, and I say that's so full of bunk. Only because I've experienced it. If I didn't experience it, then it would be something totally different. But this is my truth. And that's the other key to it, too, is if your truth is this truth, then that is your truth. Who am I to say that it's different? And vice versa. So if my truth is this truth, don't tell me my truth is a lie, because I know different. I will not or try not to tell you that your truth is a lie. Do I go backwards sometimes? Yeah, I do. I'm trying to learn not to do that.
Now, I have a bit of, this could potentially be a personal question, so you can answer it or you don't have to.
Okay.
Has there ever been a point in your life where your extrasensory abilities have conflicted with your religious beliefs? When it comes to, like, other people, like, judging your abilities?
No, I don't believe so. I have had issues with Christians who say what I do is the devil's work, which has conflicted with my emotions. Yes, I've had that. But and that was when I first started doing what I do. Now it's like, okay, as you grow, that doesn't bother you anymore. As you become aligned with spirituality, your divinity inside of you, and the knowledge and the awareness, that doesn't bother you anymore, and you don't attract it, because your thoughts attract what comes to you.
Exactly.
So I don't have as much issue with that anymore. No. Mm-mm.
Yeah, I never really
I
had
come across
an issue with it either.
Mm-hmm. So it's like, okay, you do what you do, I do what I do, and let's go on. Have I had people walk out on me because they're like, oh, yeah, I can't be around it? Yeah. Yeah, but that's where they're at. That's acceptable. That's where they're at. And you have to what do you want to call it? Acknowledge that. You have to accept that. That's where they're at.
You have to accept that that's where
they're
at on their path. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's where they're at. The other thing I learned is when I first started on this path, I wanted everybody to know about this stuff, because this is really cool. I wouldn't change it for anything in the world, and I still say that. But I thought that everyone needed to know this and wanted to know this. And so, not that I was very pushy, but when it come an opportunity, when I received an opportunity, I put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
Was it always accepted? Not really. So you learn. You learn who you can talk to and who you can't.
I think that's what made me gravitate to you when I first met you, because I could tell. I was like, this woman has some abilities. I can totally tell.
Did you know it was abilities versus just the energy?
Well, I could tell based on the energy that you had abilities. It was a combination of how you carried yourself. One thing, I am very good with reading a person through eye contact, and you would always make direct eye contact with me, no matter the situation.
Mm-hmm.
And even that makes a lot of people uncomfortable.
I was going to say, you would believe how many people that makes uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I know.
And I've been told, too, I have a look. When you do look in the eyes, that is very deep.
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's a lot of knowledge behind it. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
Well, there's that cliche, term or phrase, it's the eyes are the windows into the soul. Maybe that's where that came from,
And it's very possible. I can tell you I had two instances, one with Patrick and then one with someone else that I worked with some time ago, where I did look into their eyes, and it was either I was pulling information out, which I don't know what it was, or they were drawing me. One of the two, and it was like the freakiest thing I ever felt. But it was like, what the heck was that? And I still don't know what that was. But with Patrick was the same. I did that one time with him too, or it happened with him, I should say. And I don't know of any information that I gleaned from it, but it did happen. It was like I was there. I mean, that was like it was coming right into me, right in through my eyes. So I know what you're saying about, the eyes are the doorway to the soul type of thing.
Yeah.
It was the freakiest thing ever.
Another thing that I can read, and I guess you could say this is like aura reading, or potentially, I can read, or I can physically sense the protective bubbles that everyone has around them, and what type of bubble it is, and how they create it, and things like that. Huh?
I didn't know that about you. That's interesting.
I don't use it often, but I usually use it when looking into their eyes doesn't give me enough information. Because some people are very good at concealing things,
hiding.
And if I cannot get that information out of their through visual contact, then that tells me that there's something in between me and them that's preventing me from doing that.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think it's easy to determine how, like, defensive, for example, a person is based on the walls that they put around them, like the invisible walls they put around them.
Well, and I can tell you, because I can read auras, that if I see an aura, there's two meanings to this. If I see an aura that I can't see and is very close to the body, that means two things. Okay? That means either they're ill or they're hiding something.
Mm.
I mean, there's no aura. I mean, none. And again, the experiment that I've tried or done with Patrick had an aura like that. The fortunate or unfortunate thing was he was ill, but he was also very secretive too. So when that energy is there, and if you're secretive, even someone like myself who reads auras, or someone like yourself, whatever, it's hard to penetrate that.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you know the right combination.
Exactly.
And that's the trick. And not everything is cut and dry. I can't tell you the combination, because you have to figure out your combination and how you do that, or how you tune into that energy.
Exactly. Because we all tune into that energy differently, or in different wavelengths.
Absolutely. And I would say the majority of people do not protect themselves energetically.
Mm-hmm. Or they say that. And I think that's the case because they do it because they don't realize it. Or some people, I mean, this isn't as frequent, protect themselves too much, but don't realize it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a traumatic event could induce such a state.
It's part of withdrawal. You withdraw within, and that's a protective mode. Like kids, they'll draw within if something happens to them that's traumatic, like sexual abuse or beating or thing. They will go somewhere else, and that's exactly what they do. They withdraw within, and then they go somewhere else with inside of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people do that. It is quite interesting through all that stuff.
It is, definitely. But like we were talking about earlier, most people would assume that, oh my gosh, this is evil stuff. Why would anyone talk about it?
Yeah, it's not.
And they need to realize that, it is, like, it's not evil, it's perceptive.
Right. And it goes, again, like I said before, it goes back to religion. It goes back to spirit or Christianity. And I'm picking on Christianity a little bit because I know more about that than I do the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the other ones are very open to this stuff, and they taught the energies and the chakras and all that stuff. But Christianity seems to close it down. And to a degree, so does the Muslim religion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just amazing how we are so based in fear with this stuff, and we shouldn't be, because it's natural. This is all natural stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Every single bit of it.
I completely agree.
I really am intrigued with you talking about the bubble and the protective stuff. So when you first met me, did you see any protective mode there?
There was a bubble there, but I think how you work, you also look at people that way, and I think you saw that I, was very open with my bubble, so you invited me into yours. Gradually, though. Does that make sense?
It does. I didn't ever look at it that way, and I don't use the bubble because the bubble can be popped.
Mm-hmm. Well, remember, the bubble can be the bubble can be made of different things.
Right.
Yours, your bubble was very, it was see-through, and it was kind of like water. It was liquid.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. I'm glad you picked up on that, because that's exactly what I wanted. At that time, that's what I was doing, actually.
Really? Well,
like a mirror effect.
Yay, I'm glad that I was a little bit more perceptive than I thought.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Back then, I really didn't have much of a bubble, if you remember correctly.
Yeah, I know. I've been trying to teach you to toughen it up a little bit.
Right.
And you're doing a pretty good job. You're protecting yourself.
More so now than
also,
before.
Yeah. But that's also something too, is if we forget to do something like that, that's how these people can manipulate the energies.
Mm-hmm.
Or people can manipulate your energy to get you to do whatever they want you to do in a process.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And by speaking about this stuff or talking about this stuff and exploring, and that's the thing, is people, you got to explore. You have to explore. Don't take it verbatim. Someone says in the New Age arena, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. No, you don't. The only thing you have to do is figure out what is right for you.
Exactly.
And then follow your own path. That's why I have what I say is follow your own heart, for only you know which path is right for you. And I will continue to say that.
True.
I mean, I can
and we can't. We can't sit here and criticize people's paths. Like, I mean, that's their individualized direction.
Yep, absolutely. Because that is where they're at. I mean, my path, again, started out with Christianity. It started out with Catholicism. It actually didn't start with Catholicism. It started out with being a Baptist and being told that I wasn't able to do what I knew I was able to do, and then went to the Methodist religion, and from there it's just quite interesting.
Mhm.
And it took years. It literally took years. And I'm glad and I'm grateful because I was able to learn a lot.
Mhm.
And Patrick was right. There is a difference between spirituality and religion. Huge difference.
What do you think the difference between those two are? What do you think it is? I mean, my horrible grammar today. Oh my gosh.
Okay, that's fine. For me, religion is more dogmatic. Okay, it explores only a certain aspect, a certain point, where spirituality is more open to anything and everything. Okay, and spirituality doesn't condemn you because you think this way or you feel that way or you experience this or you experience that. Where religion says you will do what I do or what I say and you will follow these guidelines and this is what it is. And does it have some of the mystical aspects to it? You betcha. But not like spirituality. Spirituality is more open.
I always distinguish the two by recognizing that religion is more, to me, religion is a bit more political, and spirituality is a little bit more spiritual. I mean, and keep in mind, I'm using those terms very, very, very loosely. But if you examine religion has more of a hierarchical structure. I mean, if you look at Catholicism, for example, you have the Pope who is at the head of the entire church, and then you have different echelons of groups of people who represent, like, the leadership of the church. For spirituality is more centered on, like, the self as the leader, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's more of an individual path versus a group path.
Right. For you managed to incorporate both of them into yourself, which I think is excellent.
You think I have?
Oh, yeah. I mean, you have your own spiritual beliefs, like your own personal spiritual beliefs, but you also have beliefs rooted in Catholicism.
Right.
So you've managed to incorporate both of which into your belief system, and that's how that's how you use your abilities.
And even that's changing. Because I even have part of that basis is also indigenous. And those are all changing. So now more and more as I read and as I explore and as I research and as I develop myself, I'm pulling further and further away from all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe there's more of a mysticism or mystical aspect. And I know you have Christian mysticism, you have Jewish mysticism, you have other, and I get it, but I'm not it. This is just something totally different, and I don't even know how to coin it.
Brenda mysticism.
It could be, but it's starting to go more towards the Hermetic or Rosicrucian type of thing. And I've read quite a little bit about the Rosicrucians, about Masons, about other things, but more of the Kabbalion. That's definitely the Seth material is another aspect. But it's just more and more, and it's really kind of a neat journey. It is a neat journey to have or to be on. Is it easy? No. Many people don't make it because it becomes overwhelming, and they cannot look at themselves in such a way and to see their flaws and to look at them and critique themselves. It's very, very difficult, even to look at themselves in the mirror.
Exactly.
That is the hardest thing for most people to do.
Some people are just terrified of change. Like, if it's something even moderately different, it's either evil or terrifying or both.
Well, if you look at yourself in the mirror, I mean, you are looking at yourself just like other people would be looking at you. And that's a fear people can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
Because you might see something you don't like about yourself.
Exactly.
But I can tell you that when you're looking at someone else and you don't like something about them, that's because you resonate with something about you that you don't like about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
People don't like
reflection.
Like that either. That's right. It's that mirror reflection. Absolutely.
People don't always realize, though, that it is a reflection. That's the problem.
Yep. And it is what it is. And that's a famous saying of mine now, too. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If you can advance far enough within your spirituality to not be affected by chaos and everything else around you that's going crazy and haywire, you've got something going on.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a friend of mine who was going crazy at work and stuff like that, and I'm like, whatever. And I told her, I said, hey, it is what it is. There's nothing you can do to change it. It is what it is. She got so upset at me because she wasn't there yet. Several years later, when something else happened, she finally said to someone that she knew, it is what it is. And I'm like, you got it, sister. You got it. You finally got it. She's like, yeah, I do. It's
amazing how things turn out that way.
Yeah, but I also knew that she wasn't there yet. I mean, and that's okay. That's the way it should be. Is accepting people for who they are, no matter who they are. Is it tough? Oh yeah, sometimes it's tough. But it's seeing the love within them, seeing them. Sometimes you have to walk away to see it, though.
Mhm. Well, sometimes, I like to look at it like a door. Some people are just terrified to step through it.
Mhm. Yep.
They're just
unwilling
to step through it. And there are many doors. Yep. We always hear the phrase, when one door closes, another one opens. I certainly believe that.
Yep.
That's why I don't get discouraged. I think that's a part of every aspect of life. I don't really get discouraged about work or school anymore because I know that if something happens and it doesn't pan out, something else will happen.
Mhm.
I mean, it may be something even better.
Well, and if you can realize that right at that particular time and just allow it to do what it's going to do, you are better off than saying, "Oh my God, I missed that opportunity," and blah blah blah, drama here, drama there, blah. You're. I have a hard time with people with drama. I mean, because their energy is so sporadic and chaotic and like
well, see, the thing that drives me crazy about drama is that people a lot of the time create it themselves.
And they do. They do. They don't even realize it. And it's all about the energy. They don't know why they have to have it, but it's about the energy and the comfort level within that energy.
Mhm. Definitely agree.
And once they evolve to a higher plane or to a different plane, more equal plane for them to be in alignment with their soul purpose, I believe they become calmer and calmer.
Mhm.
But it takes a lot.
I agree.
It takes a lot. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something that you got to continue to go forward with, and to know that sooner or later, not to get discouraged, which it can be, you can do that very easily, but just to go forward and know that things are going to happen when they're supposed to happen, and don't get impatient. And that was part of my issue, or is part of my issue sometimes. I get impatient because I want it now, but then
me too.
But then you don't want it now, because if you get it now, you don't get everything that you need to get to to receive, so you can deal with the situation. The other thing too is, if anybody's starting on their path or just starting on their path, don't ask for it all, because that's the toughest road to go. Trust me. Been there, done that. It is tough. So they'll give you, the universe, God will give you whatever you ask for. But just be more selective. Say, okay, I want this first, this next, instead of saying, I want to learn it all.
we have to learn it at certain points, because we have to process it before we can continue.
Right.
People forget that processing aspect is like an important aspect, because that's how we're applying whatever information it is to our identity.
Mhm. Yeah. And really, isn't it identity, or is it just, it is what it is?
Mhm. That's a very good question.
Yeah. And I think that's why a lot of Native Americans won't say that they're this or they're that. They won't say that technically they're not, medicine men or medicine women, or they're shaman, or they're whatever, because it is what it is. The divine source gave them that ability or that power or that, whatever they want to call it, and it is what it is. So you don't accentuate on it. You don't call it an identity. You don't say, this is what I am, because that's ego speaking.
It turns it almost into an object in a way, or turns the individual into an object, or turns the ability into an object, which not everyone thinks of themselves that way. Sometimes thinking in that way takes the power away from what they do.
Right. And when you do something on the spiritual plane, or for the spiritual plane, don't talk about it, especially if it's a healing, or if it's getting rid of a ghost or whatever you want to call it. Don't talk about it, because you bring it back.
Mhm.
You relive it, that energy. Again, it goes back to thoughts have power.
Mhm. Well, it has a lot of it has to do with how people talk about it too. Like there are definitely many different ways of talking about things.
True. Very true. Because
go first.
I'm going to say, because if you don't learn, how you talk about it, and if you put your emotion or the expression in it or whatever, you're bringing that back in that manner. If you talk about it calmly and objectively, that's a different story.
Mhm.
it brings in a different energy. And
exactly. And, I was just going to say,
But
this is why things happen for a lot of people repetitively, because they don't realize that they need to change their thought process in order to create changes around them.
Right. Kind of goes back to the old saying, and I hope I get this right, is if you continue to do what you've always done, you're going to continue to receive what you've always received. Yeah, something like that. And I did say it incorrect, but it's the same process there.
Yeah, and the thing is, being able to do that is difficult. Like, I mean, even to this day, like, I sometimes slip up, and I'm just like, oh, shit, I thought that, I brought that to me, and now look.
But you recognize that it was you who did that. It wasn't some other, entity out there doing it to you.
And I don't necessarily think that we ever become perfect at what we do either. Like, imperfection exists to help keep us on track, to help keep us striving for something better, to help us improve as individuals, whether it be on like the emotional level, spiritual level, creative level, what have you, any level.
True, because I'm here to tell you, when I started on my spiritual path, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to continue to receive, and I didn't think about this at the time, but continue to receive the information the way I've received it. But as time went on, the process went on, it changed on me. It changed. At one point, I was getting it this way, and now I'm getting it this way. Then you had to learn that way. Then the next time, and it takes a little bit till you get it, and it becomes natural. And then all of a sudden it switches up again. I just went through that just a little bit ago. It switched up again on me, and I'm like, wow, okay. All right, let me learn how to figure out how to, get this information. And not necessarily where it's coming from, but it's there, and so, okay.
There are instances where I know I've been in this situation before where I think that I know how to do something, and then something happens, and I'm back at square one again. And then I ask myself, why the heck am I back at square one? And I mean, when you think about it, life is very cyclical. Everything happens in a circle, I think. Everything comes in full circle. And things repeat themselves, and it seems like it's being repeated in the same way, but every time there's a little bit of variation. But there is a reason for that variation. It's just determining what that difference is that's difficult.
Well, and it goes back to the analogy of the onion peel. It's layer by layer till you get down to the core. So even though we may have thought that we went through this already, well, we may have gotten just a piece of the onion layer away, and we have to go deeper and to get to the core issue. And once you get to the core issue, then you don't have to deal with that anymore. Then it's gone.
Right. Exactly.
At least for the most part, anyways. So,
I mean, that like the afterthought, the memory still exists, but for the most part, it's gone.
Right. Unless you think about it over and over and over and over again, then you reprogram the brain to go back there. But once you get it programmed where it's gone, then you're cool. I mean, there's a lot of aspects of these things.
Memory can be a good or a bad thing, because sometimes if a person relies too heavily or lingers too heavily on that memory, it can just bring it right back.
Yep. Sometimes you don't want it back. Sometimes you've healed too much, and then all of a sudden you bring it back because of depression or you're thinking about things, and that's not a good thing, because you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting the other person too, because you're energetically back connected to that individual. I mean, there's a lot of aspects to spirituality.
And sometimes back into that memory is necessary. Some people refuse to. but they don't learn from what happened until they do delve back into that memory. So it definitely goes both ways.
Yep. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our show, and I thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Donnie, for being my host all the time.
Anytime.
We have really great stuff in it. Yeah. And just remember, okay, whatever you guys do out there, and it's your decision, is follow your heart, for only you know which path is right for you. And you may have teachers that come and go, or people to teach you, this or that, but always remember, take what resonates with you and make it yours, and drop the rest. With that, have a great week, everyone, and we will catch you next week on Donnie Speaks, Universal Dreamers Radio. Have a great day, everyone.